DeCesare Group Podcast. Welcome back. I'm your host, Jim DeCesare, and I'm glad you're here. You know, we're quickly approaching the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, and patriotism is alive and well. Who better to talk history with, and specifically the impact some great Kentuckians have had on our great nation, than longtime historian Sam Terry. Sam Terry is a historian, author, speaker, and the creator of a popular blog sharing Kentucky history. While serving as managing editor of his local newspaper, his syndicated weekly column, My Kentucky, evolved into Sam Terry's Kentucky, a daily blog featuring a mini lesson in Kentucky's history for each date on the calendar. Now, 8 years later, the blog serves up a daily dose of history to over 46,000 subscribers. Sam was the original researcher and writer for the Kentucky Humanities Council program Think History, now broadcast on public radio stations throughout Kentucky each day. For 32 years, he has conducted cemetery walking tours in his hometown of Glasgow, highlighting local history. He also conducts Civil War walking tours to the community for local schools. In addition to his work related to history, he manages his family's 197-year-old cattle farming operation in Barron County on the same land his ancestors purchased when they moved from Virginia to Kentucky. Here's my conversation with Sam Terry. Sam Terry, welcome to the DeCesare Group Podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. This is a real honor.
Well, you know, we are in the midst of the 250th anniversary of this great country of ours, and you being a historian of Kentucky, we know Kentucky had a large part in the history of this great country, not just during the Revolutionary time, but ever since, and maybe even before.
Certainly.
And so you've spent a lot of years uncovering Kentucky stories that many people have never heard about. Talk about your background and your decades of experience in highlighting local history.
Well, I grew up in a family that loved history. My grandfather in particular, and his parents had both died when he was just a teenager, and I think he always felt like that he didn't get to know things like he wished that he had heard from his parents because they were gone, and I was the only grandchild. So he wanted to make sure that I was well-versed in the family lore, and that sort of spread out into other areas. I developed a real passion for history in high school, thanks to my AP history teacher, Mrs. Helen Russell, and she had a big impact on me. And about that same time, I was given the personal papers and memoirs of a lady named Nettie B. Depp, and she was my great-great-aunt. Mm-hmm. And a relative had those and said, "Here, take all of this. You might enjoy doing something with it." And I transcribed all of those and put them into book form when I was a senior in high school. And that began a whole series of activities for me in sharing Nettie Depp's story. Nettie Depp was the first woman to run for public office in Barron County in 1913, before women could even vote at the polls, and she won. And at that time,
which office?
She was the county school superintendent, which in that era was an elected county office, just like the sheriff or the clerk and so forth. And she did very well with that, and so I delved into that. Simultaneous to all of that, our county clerk, Wilmer Hodges, asked me if I would be able to help with some research. Now, this was 40 plus years ago, nearly 50 years ago, and people doing research were still handwriting a letter and sending a self-addressed stamped envelope to get the response. And they would want great-grandpa's deed or an ancestor's marriage certificate and a photocopy. And he said, "I don't have enough staff to take care of all of this." And they send a little money, and if you'll just do this, you take the $2 that they send and fulfill those. So I started researching Barron County families that way, right in the vault of the courthouse, through all of the old records. And that helped to develop my interest in local history because I wanted to know more about those people.
Right. That's fantastic. And I think a lot of our listeners are history nuts to some extent, or history buffs, I should say. I know my first experience, I was probably 10, 11 years old and happened to catch a PBS program where they were searching for Civil War artifacts in Kentucky. And I was like, that's cool, So I've always had a keen interest in American history and, gotten to learn a lot of Kentucky history over the last 40-something years. So I'm a lot older than that, but, and of course, the United States is celebrating its 250th anniversary. What do you think Kentuckians should better understand about this state's role in shaping the nation?
I think the primary thing they need to understand that most people don't is that Kentucky had a lot going on during the American Revolution. When we're studying the American Revolution in our history classes and textbooks, we're reading about battles that are in the 13 colonies.
Right.
But yet Kentucky is the wilderness, and yet English descendants were migrating into Kentucky if they were brave enough, and claiming land, and there was a great deal of activity taking place here. And of course we had George Rogers Clark, who was sent here by Governor Patrick Henry to begin trying to come into Kentucky. And of course he went to Corn Island first, which was the founding spot of the city of Louisville, and from there he conquered what we used to call, or still call, the Great Northwest. Illinois and Indiana and Ohio, and all of those things were taking place. You think about the kidnapping of Daniel Boone's daughter and the Callaway sisters by Native Americans on the Kentucky River in 1776, and that happened just 10 days after the Declaration of Independence was signed. And nobody in Kentucky knew about that, obviously. So it's a lot of fun to realize the parallel activities that were taking place at the same time to help found this country.
And was at that time during the beginnings of this country, Kentucky was originally part of Virginia.
Correct.
Was Kentucky part of Virginia at that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we were one of the 13 colonies.
We technically were. Essence. Yes. And we became Kentucky County of Virginia, and then Kentucky County was dissolved and divided into Jefferson, Lincoln, and Logan counties, and Fayette. And then obviously divided many, many times since then.
120 times.
True. True. Well, there was actually 122 at one point. We had a county that never quite made it. They attempted to create that county over near Moorhead and Carter County, and it was declared.
It never took off. Huh?
It was declared that it was illegal because it was too small. You had to have a certain amount of miles of space there. But anyway.
Do you know what the other county was that tried to
it was Beckham County, named for Governor Beckham, and that occurred soon after the turn of the 20th century.
Okay, and where was it going to be?
Northern portion of eastern Kentucky.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So how about that? So we went from one county to 4 to now 120, and we almost had 122.
Correct.
That's
correct.
Awesome. Which historical figure from Kentucky do you believe deserves far more national attention? I know we talk about Henry Clay and Daniel Boone and I guess Jim Bowie to some extent is a Kentucky native. But which one do you not hear a lot about that really had a prevalent role in shaping this Commonwealth and our country?
Well, she's not from the Revolutionary War period.
Okay.
And the person I think who really deserves a huge amount of publicity is Cora Wilson Stewart.
Okay.
Cora Wilson Stewart was from Rowan County, Moorhead, and she was a school teacher. And she came up with this novel idea because she realized that there was a tremendous population of adults that could not read or write. And so she established the Moonlight School movement. And Moonlight Schools were held in the one-room community schools at night, typically on nights that the moon was brightest, so people could safely walk in the dark to their neighborhood school, and the teachers taught adults to read and write.
How about that?
And her idea, the first year, she had 1,200 adults in Rowan County who learned to read and write.
In the first year?
First year.
Wow.
And that idea just exploded all over Kentucky. There were Moonlight Schools in Warren County and Barron County and Logan and all around the state. From there, it expanded into a nationwide movement because we had so many illiterate people in our country. That even spilled over to the U.S. military because there was an enormous percentage of our military forces who could not read and they could not write their name.
Wow.
And Cora Wilson Stewart wrote the handbook to teach U.S. soldiers to read and write, and also to explain in simple terms why we were at war in World War I. And she had a lot of notoriety at that time and was appointed to various national commissions and so forth. But, that's the beginning of the idea of adult education.
Yeah.
We learn all of our lives.
Yeah.
And, all the military figures get a lot of press, and we know about them repeatedly. But when you get down to Cora Wilson Stewart, she's doing something that's so basic for our existence in being able to read and write and interpret what you're reading, that I think she would be the person who ought to be greatly lauded in our state and beyond.
Of adult literacy programs.
Yes.
Yes. I never knew that. And, that's one of those stories. If there was someone else, who would that be?
Possibly Mary Breckenridge.
Okay.
Starting the Frontier Nursing Service. She was from a wealthy, highly connected family in the Bluegrass area with money, and she recognized a tremendous need in eastern Kentucky for health care for women and children in particular, and started a service of sending trained nurses on horseback through the mountains to take care of people.
Wow.
And saved a number of lives, helped to bring into this world a lot of children that were healthy and able to thrive. So I think she would be another one that really should get a lot more attention.
Well, your blog and your Facebook page reaches literally tens of thousands of readers almost every day. Why do you think people are still hungry for history, especially local history, especially in this age of social media and short attention spans? Thoughts on, and also share your thoughts about history being taught today.
Well, I think one of the things that we run into is history is not always taught, Kentucky history in particular, in all schools. Mm-hmm. I think that is improving at this point, and that was part of the reason I wanted to create the blog. Is on a whim, I started posting some Kentucky history stories on certain dates, and that was just random on my personal Facebook page. And suddenly I was getting messages from all of these people. How do I get those posts? And why don't you write more of those?
Yeah.
And, I toyed with the idea, well, would people really spend 5 minutes reading a short piece about Kentucky history every day? And they will. I've discovered that. I think one of the things that keeps it interesting for people, so many students get bogged down in history. They get to a point in the classroom version of history, and an era or a war or something that's not really of interest to them, and they get bogged down and they feel like they have to memorize dates and all of these things, it turns them off.
Yeah.
The difference with my blog is that it is based on the calendar. Everything is on a calendar date, and the stories are not in chronological order from the beginning of Kentucky to the present.
Right.
So they move around
Yeah.
from century to century every few days. And so I think that does keep people interested. I think people do have a lot of interest in local history, and they have a hard time getting that sometimes. For me personally, several years ago, I began giving walking tours of the Glasgow Municipal Cemetery. And I was shocked when I just let people know I was going to do this and made a flyer. And this was 32 years ago.
Yeah.
And 80 people showed up.
Wow.
And I realized walking through the cemetery and talking about people buried here is a way to tell the history of the community.
Sure.
And these were the movers and shakers and a lot of unknowns as well. And people loved it. So I've been doing those walking tours for 32 years now. I now do about 6 or 8 a year.
Okay.
And still get a crowd for most of them. I also encountered a situation where one of our local teachers called and said, "Could you give a tour of Civil War Fort Williams in Glasgow?" I said, "Yes, I can, but what else are you going to do? Because you can tell the story of what we know about Fort Williams in 15 minutes or less."
Yeah.
And that's a lot of effort to bring 80 school children across town for a 15-minute lesson, even though you're going to the spot. I said, "Why don't you do a walking tour of Civil War sites in our community?" Well, one thing led to another, and I took on the task of creating that tour and leading it.
Uh-huh.
And it was amazing because we've given that to 8th grade students for several years now, and it takes close to half a day to do the entire walk. We walk all over our downtown and stop at sites that were there or had a connection to the Civil War. And the kids are so excited about it. They're like, "We had no idea that things in the Civil War actually happened here in our town." And they're excited about that. So I think we have to step back and realize that we don't always learn history from a textbook. We get it in a variety of ways through experiences and tours and museums and that sort of thing.
Who's the most famous person buried in the Glasgow Cemetery?
One would probably be Franklin Gorin. Franklin Gorin was the first child born in Barron County when it was created, and he became its first historian and wrote a book. He served in Congress and did a variety of things throughout his life. He was a very fine, well-respected attorney, both in Kentucky and in Nashville. But he's buried there. And, of course, the great Dr. C.C. Howard, who did so much to advance medicine in all of South Central Kentucky, is buried there. So quite a few. My tour usually talks about 72 people in the course of the tour.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
People that had an impact on Barron County and its history. And
certain. Yes.
That's awesome. I think that's great that the kids get out there too, because, that old house that they see every day when the bus or car goes by, now it has some meaning to them.
Absolutely.
And
it spreads. We recently had a group of high school students in the high school history club from Marion County who came to Barron County, and they spent their Saturday cleaning up and restoring a cemetery.
Oh, that's nice.
And their club has done this. They happen to have a teacher who's from Barron County, and was a cemetery near her parents' home, and they came and did a wonderful job. And, they loved doing it. They learned and researched the people who were buried there and could tell you about them. And so I think it's great anytime we can get a young person interested and involved.
Yeah, absolutely. You've studied Kentucky history across wars, politics, culture, and everyday life. Are you seeing any patterns from the past years that you see repeating themselves today in the U.S. and in Kentucky?
Well, I think we do every day. Just in general, we see patterns of activity politically and culturally. They may not always be exactly the same, but history, of course, gives us a path to remember those things and recognize how they were addressed in past decades and what we might do in today's world. And I do think.
I was on our last podcast with Kelly Paul. We were talking. I can't remember if it was during the podcast or on the side, but you hear a lot about divisive politics in today's, and I think it's amplified by social media, obviously. Mm-hmm. But you go back to the revolutionary times and during George Washington's first term as president, they had newspapers then that, would be equivalent to Fox News and CNN. There's always been political divide. I just think it's amplified more. But, and at that time, when they had the political divide, it was at times violent, and but it was just as divisive as some of the things you hear today.
I agree. 19th century politics was ruthless.
Oh yeah.
You had to have a pretty thick skin to run for office, to serve in office, and to affect change in the country. If you were living in that era, it was not easy.
No, it's not. Still not. So after 8 years of writing these daily lessons, what story or discovery still sticks with you emotionally or genuinely surprised you? Other than the couple you've already talked about.
Well, I was going to, my first would have been Cora Wilson Stewart. There are just so many that, can come to mind. They all stick with you. And, it's always exciting when you run across something that you had no clue about. And you realize that we had a Kentuckian who was doing something pretty neat somewhere around the world. One that comes to mind is a gentleman who was born in Kentucky and raised here for a period of time. He ended up being quite a colorful character, sailing the oceans, but he also was the creator of the Mardi Gras doubloons that you find at Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
And you think, how did a Kentuckian do that? And you think about Garrett Morgan, the inventor of the traffic light, being from Kentucky, born into slavery. And he creates something that we take for granted and use multiple times a day.
Yeah.
And those stories are all through Kentucky history. And sometimes I think, if you just come up with a subject and we'll find where there's a Kentucky connection to it, because there's one somewhere in the story.
Well, one of my favorites, being an old radio guy, is Stubblefield from Murray. He's the one that invented the radio.
Correct.
For the record.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think, was it Marconi? They say that gets the credit a lot of time, but it actually happened right there in Murray, Kentucky.
Yes. Stubblefield just was not necessarily in the right spot in the right era, but he did it, and he deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah, and of course, we have great figures like Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, Colonel Sanders, which is known throughout the world. But just a lot of cool history right here in Kentucky that we kind of take for granted and don't pay enough attention to.
That's right. And, and I think we also have to be aware that we've slighted for decades the history of indigenous peoples in Kentucky. there's some fabulous research being done in today's world about Native Americans in all of Kentucky and what really happened to them. You know, the American Revolution was fought to be free of Britain, but it was also an effort in Kentucky to take land that somebody else considered theirs.
Right.
And that created a lot of problems. I think we also have not really sufficiently covered the story of women. I have found it fascinating just to pick out any of these great early figures in history that we know about, Benjamin Logan and George Rogers Clark and so forth, and then, well, who are their wives?
Yeah.
And you sometimes find that the wives were doing some really amazing things. No one ever wrote it down.
Right.
And, a great example is William Whitley, who built the first brick house west of the Allegheny Mountains. He also is the person who built a racetrack in front of his home, the first in Kentucky, and he insisted that the horses race counterclockwise, opposite of the British tradition, because he despised the British. But it also turns out his wife, Esther, was a far better shot than he was, that she was fighting off attacks from Native Americans and raising a family and doing all kinds of things that just kind of got overlooked in the original record, and obviously African American history. I think there have been some great efforts to expose people to African American history in Kentucky, and it needs to continue.
Yeah, awesome. If you could sit down for 1 hour with any historical Kentuckian, who would that be, and what would you ask them?
There would be a lot of them that I would enjoy being around. I again would go back to Cora Wilson Stewart, and to think that she started a movement that became a nationwide effort in the early 20th century with very limited means of communication. There were no telephones. You were doing everything by handwritten letter and that sort of thing, and how she accomplished all of that. She would be one that I think would be fascinating to spend an hour with.
I'd have to say someone like Henry Clay or
oh yes,
Abraham Lincoln. I don't know. There are so many. I mean, really, that I think anybody would like to sit down for an hour with them.
I think so.
Yeah. All right. So how can people find you and possibly even book you for a presentation or,
The original Sam Terry's Kentucky started on Facebook, and you can still find it there by that name, Sam Terry's Kentucky. And there's also a corresponding website, also samterryskentucky.com, no apostrophe.
Yep.
And you can find it there. There's contact information there. I do about 20 speaking engagements a year, so close to 2 a month on average, and that's always an interesting thing to do.
I bet.
And I always learn something from each of those experiences as well. Yesterday I was speaking to a sold-out crowd, amazingly, at Waveland Historic Site in Lexington about Revolutionary War figures in Kentucky. And so it's fun to do those things, and I do them when I can work it into my schedule.
I'll put a link in the show notes so they can check out your website. Last question here, because we are celebrating the 250th anniversary of our country, and obviously a lot of that goes back to the summer of 1776, and really even the year before. Which Kentuckian do you think had, I don't want to say the most impact, but had an impact on the founding of this country and during that time era, was somehow engaged in what was going on at that time?
I would think George Rogers Clark would be one of the top figures who had a tremendous influence, and unfortunately we don't talk about him enough.
No.
And he had a tremendous impact on the creation of the country as a whole.
Yeah, we always hear about him with Clark involved, but he did a lot of things on his own too.
Oh yes,
yeah,
yes.
So awesome. Well, Sam Terry, thanks for being on the DeCesare Group Podcast.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again to historian Sam Terry for joining us this week on the DeCesare Group Podcast, and thank you for checking us out. If you like what you hear, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a review and share your feedback with us as well. You can also follow the DeCesare Group across all of our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. And you could subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Soki Economic Development and Business News, by going to our website, thedecesaregroup.com. The DeCesare Group Podcast is produced by the DeCesare Group, a public relations and consulting firm based in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Our engineer and local historian is Justin DeCesare, with content contributions from Brooke Mattingly. The DeCesare Group Podcast is researched by Amy DeCesare. I'm Jim DeCesare, inviting you to join us again next time for the DeCesare Group Podcast.